In the game of basketball, there's a fine line between aggressive offense and selfish offense. Aggression is necessary to put pressure on the opponent, to force the defense to give attention to all 5 players on the court. But too much aggression leads to one-on-one situations, playing as individuals instead of as a collective unit. Perhaps no team in NBA history has struck the balance between aggression and teamwork better than the 2014 San Antonio Spurs. With Parker, Ginobili, Duncan, and Leonard, the Spurs had star players capable of creating their own shots. But instead of using their skill sets independent of each other, each player came together to form the beautiful game. Notice on this baseline out of bounds play, there are only 10 seconds on the shot clock. For most teams, they would just screen for their best player here and end the play with an ISO. But not the Spurs. They ignore the shot clock, reverse the ball around the perimeter, and organically get a layup at the rim just 6 seconds later. Watch the cutting on this play. After every single pass, each player cuts hard through the paint. Then once Diaw finally attacks the basket off the bounce, all of that cutting has successfully distracted the defense from maintaining proper help positioning on the drive. The basic Spurs philosophy, led by Coach Gregg Popovich, consisted of ball movement, aka passing, and player movement, aka cutting. They played what they called .5 basketball, meaning after catching the ball, each player was expected to make a decision to pass, shoot, or drive within half a second. It's a philosophy that would be adopted by another NBA dynasty just starting to first develop around the middle of the 2010s.
All right, so think about that. I need 0.5 seconds to make a decision, and that's when you start to get the dominoes to fall. All right? On the weak side, strong side, whatever it is. We're giving y'all some terminology. Remember 0.5 basketball. That's a good one to take back to y'all's team.
This is a graph that shows the best cutting and screening teams from 2014 all the way up until last season. The red line indicates teams that finished at least 10% of their possessions with an off-ball cutting action. As you can see, there are 9 dots at or above the red line. 5 of those dots represent the Golden State Warriors: 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2022. And probably by no surprise, the 2014 Spurs are one of the closest dots to those Warriors. This is my favorite example of the Spurs cutting. Kawhi goes to enter the ball into Diaw in the post here. Diaw hasn't even caught the ball yet, but watch Bellinelli on the weak side. He's already starting his cut to the basket before Diaw even touches the ball. By the time Draymond recognizes the cut is coming, it's already too late. In this video, I'll break down more of the details behind the Spurs' beautiful game, like Popovich's favorite set plays in his motion offense, and how the Spurs' offense just completely overwhelmed the Miami Heat defense on the way to an NBA championship. There might not be a more influential set play over the last decade of basketball than Gregg Popovich's motion weak. It's been copied by coaches at all different levels of the game. In fact, the play became so popular during the mid to late 2010s, college coaches began calling it America's play on their scouting reports, because everyone in America was running it, including me. When I had my first opportunity to coach a 15U team back when I was in college, the first thing I did was install motion weak into our offense. I don't have any footage from that team, but I can assure you we did not run it as well as the Spurs. The play starts out with the point guard passing the ball up ahead on the wing and then cutting to the weak side, hence the name motion weak. As the ball gets reversed back to the point guard, the other guard heads into the paint to set a cross screen for the big man inside. That cross screen then leads to screen the screener action, with the initial screener receiving a second pin down screen for a potential three-pointer. Here Tony Parker cuts to the weak side and Kawhi sets the cross screen. When Paul George temporarily loses sight of his man, Tim Duncan sets the pin down for the three. It's a relatively simple play, but the Spurs were fantastic at reading the defense and setting up different counter options. For example, when Boris Diaw was the big man receiving the cross screen, he liked to pop out towards the top of the key for a jump shot instead. Sometimes these different counters and reads were planned, but a lot of times they were improvised. making it especially hard for the defense to adjust on the fly. So the secret to motion weak wasn't necessarily the play itself, it was how well the Spurs executed the play. The close cousin to motion weak was motion strong. As you might expect, on this play, the point guard stayed on the strong side of the court instead of cutting towards the weak side. After a ball reversal, the Spurs would set a stagger screen for the player in the corner to come off looking for a shot. Here, that player receiving the stagger screen is Manu Ginobili, who nails the three. And here Danny Green knocks down the three off of strong action during the NBA Finals. Just like with motion weak, the Spurs used reads and counters to add layers to their motion strong series. They could curl the stagger screen into the paint, or the screener could slip the stagger on his own. Again, the magic here isn't the play itself. Plenty of teams run stagger screens all the time. It's a common action. The magic is in the reads, the passing, and the teamwork. The Spurs were also great at flowing into the next action if the initial was stalled out. Watch how they start in strong here, but then Diaw and Duncan flash up to the elbows into the horns formation, with Kawhi entering the ball to the elbow only to get it right back for a drive to the basket. Those flashes to the elbows were a crucial part of the Spurs' motion offense. If all else failed, a big would flash up and receive a pass, and then the guard would look to immediately cut to the basket, catching the defense sleeping by constantly remaining in motion. That offensive flow allowed the Spurs to wear opponents down. As soon as you relaxed, the next action would pick you apart. It's a dynamic that was an especially big part of the Spurs' dominant NBA Finals performance against the Heat, which leads us to our final section. At the risk of oversimplifying things, the goals of an offense can generally be broken down into two categories: creating an advantage and then converting that advantage into a basket. Creating an advantage tends to be more individual based. For example, an Allen Iverson crossover can create an advantage all by itself. Same thing with Shaq simply overpowering his defender in the post. But unlike those two examples, advantages don't always immediately lead to a basket. On this play, Shaq draws a triple team in the post. So the initial advantage has been created, but now the Lakers need to pass their way into converting it into a basket before the Pistons can recover back to even. For the Spurs during the 2014 NBA Finals, they used the ball screen to create advantages. For almost the entire series, the Heat chose to put two players on the ball when guarding ball screens, leaving a 4-on-3 situation away from the ball. Naturally, that left the roller open on several occasions, with Tim Duncan getting easy baskets at the rim. But when the Heat were able to take away the roll, that's when we really saw the beautiful game come to life in response. We've already talked about how ball movement and player movement were key to the Spurs offense, but the Spurs did more than just that. They were fantastic at attacking closeouts off the dribble. Watch here how Bosh gets put in a long closeout situation and Ginobili catches the ball on the move, blowing right by Bosh. Same concept here as Kawhi blows by LeBron. The Spurs roster had plenty of good three-point shooters who were also very skilled at utilizing the pump fake during closeouts. The better San Antonio shot the ball from three, the harder Miami tried to take it away, which then in turn helped set up those pump fakes. Some of my favorite plays from the Spurs were when Boris Diaw pump faked a shot and then went right into his signature shovel pass in the paint. Diaw wasn't the only great passing big man for the Spurs. Duncan and Thiago Splitter had phenomenal chemistry on big-to-big passes. And even though neither of those two were three-point shooters, their passing ability allowed Popovich to still play lineups with two traditional big men without slowing down the offense in the slightest. Here the Spurs start out in floppy, the pin down brings two Heat players to the ball, and Splitter then converts the advantage with a beautiful touch pass to Diaw. A final way the Spurs guards converted advantages was with the relocation cut. Here Danny Green gives the ball up in the middle of the paint, but keeps moving towards the corner for an eventual three. We've seen Steph Curry and the Warriors master these relocation cuts in recent years, but the Spurs and players like Patty Mills were ahead of their time. It felt like every player on the roster brought a unique skill set that added to Popovich's overall system. Bellinelli was a shooter and an extremely underrated cutter. Ginobili was a key creator in late clock situations. We've already talked about Diaw's passing. All of these individual Spurs came together to play as one collective unit. After splitting the first 2 games of the finals, San Antonio never looked back. They beat Miami by a combined 57 points over the next 3 games, winning a championship and cementing a legacy as one of the best teams of all time.